There are some things you never fully recover from. You just learn to carry them differently. The day I found out my husband had moved his girlfriend into our house while I was visiting my mother for the weekend, that was one of those things. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and watched her hang her clothes in my closet, and I thought, so this is how it ends. My name is Fiona. I was then 31 years old, working part-time as a bookkeeper for a small landscaping company in Naperville, Illinois, and I'd been married for 4 years to a man I genuinely believed was my person. We met in college. He was charming and decisive and had this way of making every room feel like it revolved around him. I wasn't. From a small town in rural Indiana, Martinsville, population maybe 12,000, and he was from the North Shore suburbs of Chicago, old money, golf club memberships, the kind of family that has a different set of dishes for Thanksgiving. I thought the gap between us didn't matter. I thought love was enough to bridge it. I know. His mother never pretended to like me. From the very first Sunday dinner, she made it clear that I was a placeholder at best. She had this smile she'd put on, tight, practiced, whenever I said something she found beneath her. I'd mention a restaurant I liked, and she'd say, "Oh, that chain place?" with her eyebrows raised just slightly enough to make you feel stupid without giving you anything to actually respond to. My husband would laugh it off. "That's just how she is, Fiona. She doesn't mean anything by it." She's old-fashioned. 4 years of that. 4 years of being told I was too sensitive, that I was imagining it, that I needed to try harder to connect with her. When we got married, I was still working full-time. Good job, decent salary, health insurance, 401k. My mother-in-law sat me down 3 months into our marriage, just the two of us at her kitchen table, coffee she'd made too bitter on purpose. I'm convinced, and explained to me with genuine authority, that a wife's job was to create stability at home, that my husband worked long hours and deserved to come home to a peaceful environment, that she hadn't raised him to be a housekeeper. I sat there nodding like an absolute fool. I told myself she was from a different generation. I told myself it was temporary. I quit my job 4 months later. My husband assured me it made sense financially. His salary more than covered us. And honestly, Fiona, you were barely covering your student loans anyway. He said it gently. He always said things gently. That was the trick. After I quit, things shifted fast. My mother-in-law suggested we put our joint account in her name just for now, while we got our footing. My husband agreed before I could form an objection. I was given a debit card with a monthly allowance, $800, for groceries, household supplies, and, as she put it, whatever little things you need. She reviewed every statement. She texted me about a $40 candle I bought in October. "That's not a necessity, Fiona. We're saving for a house." I didn't argue. I told myself it was temporary. My husband started coming home late in February. March. April. Always work, always a client dinner, always a thing that ran long. He smelled different. Not perfume exactly, just different. Foreign. I noticed, but I filed it away in the drawer inside myself where I kept all the things I wasn't ready to look at. The weekend he moved her in, I was in Martinsville. My mother had a minor procedure, nothing serious, a shoulder thing, and I'd gone down to help for a few days. My husband said, "Take your time, I've got things covered here." When I came back Sunday night, I unlocked the front door and heard music playing from our bedroom. I walked down the hall and saw the light on under the door. I should have knocked. I don't know why I didn't. I just opened it. She was standing at my dresser, arranging bottles, her perfume, her face cream, in the space where my things used to be. My things were in a box on the floor, not thrown out, just relocated, like I was being slowly erased, and whoever was doing it wanted to be considerate about it. She turned and looked at me. She wasn't embarrassed. That's what I keep coming back to. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who's walked into the wrong room. My husband came out of the bathroom behind me. He actually seemed annoyed that I was there. Fiona, I was going to call you, like I'd shown up early to something he'd planned. He told me her name was Serena. He told me she was going to be staying with us for a while. He told me we needed to talk and maybe I should give them a minute. I stood there in my own bedroom in my own house with a box of my face creams on the floor and I said, okay. I walked out. I sat on the couch in the living room and I listened to them murmuring behind the closed door. And I thought, I have $800 in an account I don't control and nowhere to go. The conversation on the deck happened the next morning. He was direct about it, I'll give him that. He said he'd been unhappy for a long time. He said Serena made him feel like himself again. He said the marriage had run its course, and he thought, honestly, I probably felt it too. He offered me $10,000 to make the divorce clean and simple for 4 years, for my job, for my savings, for every Sunday dinner where I smiled at his mother's tight little smile. $10,000. You have no career right now, he said, not cruelly, just factually. You have no savings. You have no network in this city. I'm being generous, Fiona. Take it and start over somewhere smaller. He actually said that. Somewhere smaller, like I should go back to Martinsville and tend to my humiliation in private. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the girl I'd been at 22, the one with the job and the apartment and the plans, the one who'd handed all of it over because someone she loved told her it was the smart thing to do. I'll think about it, I said. I went inside. My mother-in-law was already at the kitchen table with Serena, the two of them sharing a coffee like a scene from a magazine. My mother-in-law looked up and said, "Oh good, you're being reasonable. This is hard for everyone, Fiona." Serena didn't look at me at all. She was scrolling her phone. One leg crossed over the other in my kitchen chair. I walked to the guest room and I closed the door and I called the only person I could think to call. His name was Patrick. We'd worked together years ago. He'd been a senior accountant at a firm that contracted with the company I worked for. He was sharp, funny, one of those people who made competence look effortless. He'd gone on to start his own financial advisory practice. I'd lost touch with him after I left the workforce. I was embarrassed about that. Embarrassed that someone who'd known me as a professional would now find me asking for help from a guest room with $800 to my name. But I called him. He picked up on the third ring. I started talking and couldn't stop. I told him everything. The allowance, the account, the box of my things on the floor, the $10,000 somewhere smaller. I cried in a way I don't think I'd let myself cry in years. Patrick listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, there was a pause. "Fiona," he said, "where are you right now?" "In Naperville. Their house." "Stay there," he said. "Don't sign anything. Don't touch anything. I'm going to make some calls and I'll be there in 2 hours. Patrick, you don't have to. I know I don't," he said. "Stay there." He showed up 2 hours later in a gray fleece and jeans, looking like he'd just come from a Saturday morning run, which he probably had. I let him in. My husband came out of the bedroom and looked at Patrick the way men look at other men they're suddenly unsure about. "Who is this?" "A friend," I said. "Is that all right with you?" He didn't have an answer for that. Patrick and I sat in the kitchen and he made me walk him through everything. The joint account, the monthly allowance, whose name was on what, the mortgage, the deed, the cars. I wasn't. Him listening and taking notes in a small notebook he brought, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years, like someone was actually paying attention to me. Then he put his pen down and looked at me with an expression I didn't understand yet. "Fiona," he said, "I need to tell you something, and you have to promise not to react until I finish." I nodded. "Serena's last name," he said. "What is it?" I didn't know. I'd never asked. Patrick turned his notebook around. He'd written a name there. Is this her? He showed me a photo on his phone. A woman at some kind of charity event, smiling, arm around a man in a suit. The woman was unmistakably Serena. The man was Patrick. I stared at the photo, then at him, then at the photo again. She's my ex-wife, Patrick said quietly. We divorced 14 months ago. Or, I thought we did. Turns out the paperwork she submitted had some irregularities. My attorney flagged it 2 weeks ago. Technically, according to Illinois law, we are still married. The room went very still. My husband's girlfriend, the woman currently hanging her perfume bottles in my bedroom, was still legally married to someone else, which meant that whatever my husband thought he was building with her, whatever future he'd blown up our marriage for, was built on a foundation of fraud. I actually laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out. Patrick looked at me steadily. I've been trying to locate her for 2 weeks. I had no idea she was here. He paused. She also, in the last year of our marriage, transferred approximately $200,000 from our joint investment accounts into accounts I didn't know existed. My attorney is building the case now. $200,000. I thought about Serena scrawling her phone in my kitchen chair. About my mother-in-law serving her coffee like a daughter-in-law she'd always wanted. Does my husband know any of this? I asked. I doubt it, Patrick said. She's good at this. We talked for 4 hours that day. Patrick laid out a plan. Methodical, patient, careful. He had resources I didn't. Attorneys, forensic accountants, time. But what he didn't have was proximity. He couldn't access Serena or my husband directly. He needed someone on the inside. I could be that person. He was clear about the risks. He was clear about what it would cost me emotionally. He asked me 3 times if I was sure. I said yes all 3 times and meant it more each time. One more thing, he said before he left. You need to seem broken, completely. Can you do that? I thought about 4 years of practice. Yes, I said. I've had a lot of experience. The next morning, I went to my husband and told him I'd made a mistake, that I panicked, that I wasn't ready to throw away our marriage, and I was willing to make things work, whatever that looked like, even if it meant adjusting to a new situation. I made myself sound desperate and small. My husband looked almost sorry for me. It's too late, Fiona. But then my mother-in-law intervened. She always had to be the one to manage things, and said that since the divorce would take time regardless, there was no reason I couldn't stay on temporarily, as long as I understood my role. My role, she explained, was essentially what it had always been: cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery runs. Except now, I'd also be doing it for Serena. She said this brightly, like she was doing me a favor. Serena agreed to let me stay with the same magnanimous performance as before. She called it the compassionate choice. I moved my things to the basement guest room, smaller, darker, adjacent to the utility room, and I became invisible. That was the goal. Invisible women see everything. I had a recording app on my phone that Patrick had walked me through. I kept it in my apron pocket during the day. Within the first week, I had Serena on tape telling my husband that the investment account she was managing for them was performing beautifully. She used those exact words, performing beautifully, and that they'd see returns by spring. My husband, who I had once believed was the smartest man I knew, said, "You're amazing. You know that?" I also heard my mother-in-law tell her bridge club over a lunch I served and was not invited to sit at that she had finally gotten rid of the deadweight and that her son was with a woman of real caliber now. The club made appropriate sounds of admiration. I refilled the sparkling water and kept my face neutral. Patrick had given me a small secondary device, looked like a thumb drive, that I was able to plug into the router in the home office twice a week when I went in to clean. It allowed his IT consultant to mirror certain traffic. I didn't fully understand the technical side. I just did what he told me. 3 weeks in, Patrick called me late at night from a number my husband wouldn't recognize. She's using an LLC registered in Delaware, he said. Fake investment returns, real withdrawals. She's already taken $60,000 from your husband and his mother. $60,000. My mother-in-law had been talking for months about a renovation she was planning. A kitchen remodel, new floors, something about the sunroom. She'd apparently been quietly liquidating a CD account she'd had for 15 years. Gone. My husband's parents also. Patrick's forensic accountant tracked 2 wire transfers from a joint account in my father-in-law's name. Retirement savings, money they'd built over decades. All of it routed through Serena's shell company into an account that existed on paper in the Cayman Islands. These people who had dismissed me, controlled me, made me feel small for 4 years. They had handed their life savings to a woman who was still legally married to someone else because she was polished and charming and told them exactly what they wanted to hear. I didn't feel victorious about it. I felt sad and tired and furious all at the same time. The moment Patrick had been building toward came on a Saturday in November. My mother-in-law was throwing a dinner party, 15 guests, old friends of the family, some colleagues of my husband's. The occasion was loosely described as a fall gathering, but I knew what it really was, a chance to show off Serena, to introduce her formally to the inner circle. My mother-in-law had bought a new dress. Serena had apparently bought a new dress too. Nobody asked what I would be wearing, which was fine because I was going to be serving. I spent the morning cooking. Butternut squash soup, a roasted tenderloin, 2 sides, bread from scratch. I made a chocolate tart for dessert. My hands moved through it automatically while my heart beat very steadily in my chest. Patrick was coming at 8. He'd given me the timing the night before. Right after dinner, before dessert. That's when the room is warm and everyone's comfortable and nobody's ready to leave. At 7:15, the guests arrived. I circled the living room with a tray of bruschetta and glasses of wine and listened to my mother-in-law introduce Serena to people who shook her hand and said, "Wonderful to meet you, and your dress is just stunning." My husband stood beside her with his arm around her waist, looking like the version of himself he'd always wanted to be. Nobody looked at me. I was furniture. At 8 o'clock, I was in the kitchen plating the tenderloin when my phone buzzed once. Patrick's signal. I walked to the living room doorway. "Excuse me," I said. The conversations didn't stop immediately. I said it again, a little louder. My mother-in-law looked at me with an expression that said, "What on earth are you doing?" "I'd like to introduce someone," I said. "Someone I've been working with. I think everyone will want to meet him." The room had gone quiet now. My husband's jaw tightened. "Fiona, this isn't the time." "It'll just be a moment," I said pleasantly. I walked to the front door and opened it. Patrick was standing on the front step in a dark navy blazer, his posture easy and confident, 2 men in professional dress behind him. He looked exactly like what he was, someone used to being the most prepared person in any room. The guests who could see the door went quiet first, then the effect rippled backward through the room. My husband stiffened. My mother-in-law frowned, trying to place him. Serena, standing by the fireplace with a glass of red wine, went completely still. Then the color left her face. Her wineglass actually wobbled. She caught it, but just barely, white-knuckling the stem. Her lips parted and then closed. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper, and it was the last thing anyone in that room expected. "Patrick." She said his name like a door slamming shut on her. The room turned toward her, then back to him. Then the math started happening visibly on every face. "Hello, Serena," Patrick said. His voice was completely calm. "It's been a while. Who is this?" my husband said. He directed it at me. But he was looking at Patrick with something new in his expression. This is Patrick Hartwell, I said. My business partner. And I looked at Serena. I believe you two already know each other. One of my husband's colleagues, a woman named Carol who'd always been kind to me at these things, said quietly, "Is that her husband?" Yes, that her husband. Yes, that was her husband. The legal, current, valid husband of the woman standing in my living room wearing a dress my mother-in-law's stolen retirement savings may have helped pay for. Patrick walked in. He greeted me, shook a few hands, and then placed a folder on the dining table with the tenderloin I'd spent 3 hours cooking. The folder contained, as his attorney had prepared, a summary of the fraudulent transfers, the LLC documentation, a copy of the still valid marriage certificate, and a letter from the Illinois State Attorney's Office indicating that a fraud investigation had been opened. My husband read the first page standing up and then sat down very suddenly. My mother-in-law picked up the marriage certificate and read it twice and then set it back down with the careful movements of someone who has just realized they are in shock. Serena had stopped trying to explain. She stood by the fireplace holding her wine glass with both hands, her professional composure entirely gone, reduced to something I recognized. A person waiting for the floor to fall out. "Serena," Patrick said, "you can come willingly or we can wait for the officers outside. Your choice. But either way, tonight is the end of this." She chose willingly. I'll give her that. She set her glass down on the mantel, picked up her purse from the chair, and walked out of the house without looking at anyone. One of Patrick's colleagues went with her. The guests left quickly, the way people do when they've witnessed something they don't have the vocabulary for. A few of them caught my eye on the way out. Not with pity, with something closer to respect. Or maybe just surprise. My mother-in-law didn't faint, but she sat very still on the couch for a long time. When she finally looked at me, I expected anger. What I saw instead surprised me. She looked old. Just old and tired and frightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. "You wouldn't have believed me," I said. "You never believed me." She didn't argue with that. My husband sat across the room. He'd been quiet for so long I almost forgot he was there. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The confidence gone, or just the performance of it. "Fiona." He cleared his throat. I made a mistake." "Yes," I said, "several. I want to try to fix things. I know I have no right to ask, but—" "You're right," I said. "You don't." He started to say something else. I held up one hand. "My attorney will be in touch," I said. "I'd recommend getting one of your own." In Illinois, when a spouse is the at-fault party in a divorce due to adultery, and when marital assets have been dissipated, including money transferred without consent, the courts take that seriously. My attorney, a woman named Christine that Patrick had recommended, was meticulous and unbothered. She had the recording from the home office. She had the bank statements. She had 4 years of documented financial control that, she explained to me calmly, constituted economic abuse under Illinois statute. The divorce took 7 months. I got the house. It had been purchased with a down payment from my parents. Documented premarital property. I got the larger portion of what remained in the marital accounts after Serena's transfers, because my husband was the at-fault party. I got a settlement for emotional damages that made me sit down when Christine read it to me in her office. My mother-in-law filed a separate civil claim against Serena. I don't know how that resolved. I stopped keeping track. I won't pretend the 7 months were easy. There were nights in that basement room, which I refused to leave until the house was mine, where I sat on the edge of the cot and talked myself back from the edge of something dark. There were moments when I almost called my husband and said, "Let's just make it simple. I'll take what you offered. I just want it to be over." Patrick talked me through 2 of those phone calls. He never made me feel weak for having them. The morning the final paperwork was signed, I went to a coffee shop by myself and ordered a latte and a croissant, and sat at a table by the window and watched people walk by on the sidewalk and thought, I'm free. I moved into an apartment in Evanston in the spring, 3rd floor. Big windows, a neighborhood with a farmer's market on Sundays. I brought my cat, a tabby I'd had since before the marriage named Lou, and for the first time in 4 years, nobody told me what I was allowed to spend. I bought a $50 candle without a second thought. I sat with it burning in my living room and cried a little and then felt fine. Patrick and I had started working together officially. I had a natural aptitude for financial analysis. It turned out, honed by 4 years of managing a household on a controlled budget and learning, out of desperation, to account for every dollar. I enrolled in a certificate program at Northwestern. I was the oldest in most of my classes and one of the best. Within 8 months, I had a full-time position at Patrick's firm as a junior financial analyst. We were professional for a long time. Careful. Neither of us was in a hurry. And after what we'd each been through, careful felt right. It was a Sunday at the farmer's market. Him carrying a bag of apples, me comparing 2 bunches of flowers for no reason. When he said, I know this is complicated, but I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as colleagues. I looked at him. I thought about how he'd shown up at my door in a gray fleece and jeans when he had no obligation to. How he'd said stay there like it was simple. Okay, I said. He smiled. We took it slow. It was nothing like what I'd had before. No grand gestures, no being swept up in someone else's idea of what life should look like. It was quiet and mutual, and the kind of thing that builds so gradually you don't notice it happening until one day you realize you're happy, genuinely, without asterisks. My husband, last I heard, is renting a 1-bedroom in the western suburbs and working for a company 3 levels below what he used to. My mother-in-law sold the family home to cover what the courts required. I don't think about them much. Not out of bitterness. There's just nothing left there that belongs to me. I called my mother in Martinsville last week, told her things were good. She asked if I was eating enough, if the apartment was warm enough, if I'd found a good church if I wanted one. I told her I was eating plenty and the apartment was warm and I was working on the rest. You sound different, she said. Different how? She thought about it. Like yourself, she said. Like you again. I hung up and sat with that for a while. Lou jumped into my lap. Outside the window, the street was November quiet, bare trees and a gray sky and a few kids on bikes making the most of the last decent weekend before the cold settled in. I was 32 years old. I had a job I was good at, an apartment that was mine, a cat, a farmer's market habit, and a man who showed up in a gray fleece when I needed someone to show up. I had found my way back, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone tell me which direction to walk.